Okay, welcome back. And now I'd like to kind of go through very loosely the episodes of season 1 and what particularly, like, we've done a rewatch now since they first aired, and we'd like to talk about what now stands out. Do they age particularly well? What do you guys think on just that thought?
I will say, I was talking with both of you before we started officially recording tonight about how kind of emotionally devastating it was to watch all of these in quick succession rather than to allow myself a week to take a breather in between each. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to returning to that when we get to season 2. But that said, the fact that it was so emotionally devastating to watch the show in quick succession is another testament to just how powerfully adapted it is and how great the storytelling is. And they showed us in the literal first 2 minutes of the whole show in episode 1 that they weren't afraid to add to what already exists in the game. They have that 1968, I think, flashback to John Hannah's character, an epidemiologist, waxing poetic on the dangers of the fungi present in an ever-warming world and how that could manifest. And so right away they put the realities that we already know from the game in the context of global warming or climate change. And we're like, oh snap, we know what's happening. We know what this is leading to. And so yeah, so from the very beginning to have them make something new rather than just drop us in as Sarah like the game does is really special, and it helps us to know that we're in good hands going forward.
Yeah. What I really loved particularly about this first episode was they had kind of a challenge for themselves here because they had to find a way to get all these points across, like Chelsea, what you just brought up about, the connection to global warming, for example. All of the things that we see in the episode about flour being contaminated and seeing sort of the global impact starting to happen. Those are things, those are tidbits and details that you are only going to get in the game if you are being consistent with your exploring and you're finding all the newspaper articles and you're turning on the TV and you're just locating people's journals or letters. In this game, there is a lot of establishment, a lot of setup that you can miss. And because, they weren't going to be able to completely mirror the way that you explore in a game on a TV show, they still found a way to tell that story. And it was by giving us more time with Sarah. And we actually spend an entire day with her. And we see, Eric, you brought this up earlier, we see kind of day 0 of all of this going down through her eyes. And you start to see the cracks in society, I guess.
Yeah.
You start to see those very, very early on through her eyes. And nice little details they did, like how the neighbor wanted to give Sarah cookies, and it just so happened she I don't remember, she either forgot them or she didn't take them or something, and she was supposed to bake Joel a cake. They did so many nice little things to make it really clear to viewers who maybe hadn't played the game, or maybe if they did play the game they had missed some of this information. They found a way to weave that into the story, and I thought that was really, really smart.
Yeah, for sure. The first episode for me, I'm blown away by also how much territory it covers. So I recently showed Micah The Last of Us, but just the first episode when he was in Chicago a couple weeks ago. And we watched the first episode, and I was thinking, because I was like, should I show him the game too? And the amount of ground that it covers, from getting Outbreak Day, Sarah, to Joel in the quarantine zone, to Joel meeting up with Ellie, the whole situation with Tess and Robert and the battery, all of this is like 10 hours of gameplay. They managed to put it in 1 hour of television, and it doesn't feel rushed. It's not like there's that much to cut, and it's not like that there's that much that they did cut. They condensed it smartly and even threw in a Gore Lieberman shirt. And it's like, wow, this is just unbelievable. How could we possibly, compete with. And so I started then the game to show Micah in like chapter 4 or something, and I was like, this is great. It's amazing how everything worked so hand in hand, and everything was just so smartly made for TV. I'll never get over just how clever the show, especially in season 1 so far, because that's what we have, is on every decision. It's unbelievable.
Regarding the story, something that kept lingering with me while I rewatched over this last week was the title itself. And, I've always referred to The Last of Us as a concept referring to like literally the last of the people left behind, right? Like this is what is left after this thing has happened. But more and more while watching, I kept thinking of it as, quote, the last of our humanity and our efforts to hold on to it, which is admittedly less marketable. So I understand the title change. But I kept watching as characters were driven to make choices that made them in some ways less and less human, and not in the sense that they were infected and were going to become non-human literally, but that they were throwing away the connectedness that we are drawn towards as humans, as people. The relationships they were drawn to make the desperate decision rather than the caring decision. Although you could, of course, twist that based on perspective, and this game and this property is nothing but perspective. Everybody's somebody's good guy, everybody's somebody's bad guy. So in the first episode, just while we're here at the beginning, Joel losing Sarah throws him into the deep end of having lost nearly all of his humanity, like right away. We learn later in the season, this sent him into such a deep pit that he tried to end his humanity, literally. And I mean, he missed. We're grateful for it because it brought him to where he is. But through the rest of the show, it's all about clawing back towards it the best he can, and then falling backwards a few steps because Tess dies, or because of this, or because of that. It's all about Joel trying to get to the point where he can be the proper human that he started as, and other characters throughout the season losing their humanity along the way.
What about episode 2?
For me, I believe the episode is called Infected. I just love getting to see a live action clicker. And in the museum, which is one of my favorite moments in the game too, because it's just so friggin' creepy, all this Civil War, Revolutionary War stuff that's hanging around. But yeah, also, so getting reintroduced to how clickers look, feel, and are gonna work with no major changes, but then also introducing brand new concepts into the world, like this connected, interwoven sort of network of fungus, which really exists in the real world, not of cordyceps, but the mycelial network in the Pacific Northwest of America. Look it up. Really figuring out that things can work completely differently, or added elements that raise the storytelling stakes, as if this story in particular needed any more stakes added to it. Really just the second episode for me solidifies the bold choices, and also shows people who are familiar with the game from playing it, for 10 years before the show adapted it, that you don't know where this might go.
Right. And I actually want to call out something from our live stream chat. So we have someone who's joined us over on Twitch. Hey, Laz.
Hey, Laz.
Laz responding, I think, to Chelsea in saying, yeah, they really highlight that every action has a consequence. Even if from your perspective it was the right action to take, your right action very well probably hurt someone else in this world, and they're going to want to kill you. See that a lot.
Well, episode 3 was the big sort of first large departure from the events of the game. It turns out you're not roaming around a school and fighting off, a bloater at the end of it with a flamethrower. All of that in good time, my children. But instead, we're given this love story set during the last 20 years between Bill and his partner, Frank, who, they don't always get along, but I'll be damned if they're not saving each other's lives on the daily. and the decision that it must have taken and the execution of saying this is the world that we're in, the fact that the show can depart, unlike the game, the show can depart from the main characters and explain in great detail how each of them were affected by the circumstances of the world, something that it does again and again, more times than the game did, also in other areas. I'm thinking Kansas City when we get there. Like, the show really chooses to see all of its characters as full people, that you could easily get a backstory episode for this other character. It's like, it's almost Lostian in the way that they, executed this. And it's such a beautiful just love story, and a story about sacrifice, a story about the right to make your own sort of informed choice about your own life, your dignity, because of course of the way that Bill and Frank sort of choose to leave things. And it really just, nothing like it on television. I'm glad that one of the actors, at least, and both were nominated, but one of the actors awarded with an Emmy for this. It was Offerman for the Creative Arts Emmys, because both of them did just such an amazing job.
I think this might be my favorite episode of the season, precisely because it's something completely new, but it lives so comfortably within the world of the game. And, in all the behind the scenes stuff that we talked about with Mazin and Druckmann, The Last of Us, they talk about, is about love ultimately, and the lengths that someone will go to protect the person or the people that they love. And of all the terrible examples of that we get over the course of the season, episode 3 between Bill and Frank, this is the most beautiful version of that, of what sacrificial love means or can mean. And it's really the only positive version of it that we see in the entire course of the first season. And it's just so beautiful. It was such a surprise for them to do this so early in the season, to depart so completely from the game. And I loved them for it. It's so good.
Yeah.
And
well, and to give these two characters who, honestly, we don't get a ton of information about in the game. I mean, you don't spend very much time with them at all. To take that and just turn it into, as you said, its own beautiful and tragic love story. I agree with you, Chelsea. This is my favorite episode of the first season as well. It also just ripped my heart out. And at the end of that episode, and honestly, probably in a few minutes leading up to the end of the episode, I do not remember the last time I ugly cried like that over a TV show. It just really hit me in the chest. I was literally just sitting there bawling the entire time. And it was like the most beautiful, but also saddening thing I've ever seen. But to give them that wholeness of storytelling, like you were saying, Eric, it adds so much more. And I think it also gives a different sense of perspective to this world, right? Because we're going to spend a lot of time with Joel and Ellie, and they're traveling, right?
Yep.
But of course, it makes complete sense that there would be people in this kind of circumstance who are battening the hatches and trying to, do their own, doomsday survivor situation. And they're just still trying to live their lives throughout, which is beautiful. Like that. I mean, that is most of us when things are really shitty. It's like we try to do what we can, but we also still have to live our lives.
Well, and what Frank does for Bill, too, is like, well, life isn't worth living without a boutique that's been fixed up. I'm going to fix up the boutique. I'm going to grow carrots because life doesn't just stop. We're not heathens. We're going to have dinner parties. We're going to have friends over. It's that kind of stuff. And these are conversations we've legit had during the pandemic, during COVID, and are still having. Where are the limits? What risk can we take to our own vulnerability and livelihood in order to be social and part of the larger whole? What Chelsea was saying about The Last of Us that's still around, like just absolutely amazing. And the other thing about Long Time, the episode, is that it still furthers in a really interesting way the Joel and Ellie situation. In the game, you get a truck battery and you're able to drive west. That's what your characters need to do. Joel still gets that in the show, but he's also given by Bill a purpose. Via the letter, the suicide note that he's written, he reminds Joel and he says, "You and I are protectors." Sorry, I could do a Nick Alford. "You and I are protectors." But he's like, he tells Joel that his purpose is to protect the ones he loves. And Joel is still completely foreign to the idea of loving Ellie, but the chinking in the armor is slowly like wearing away. And because he just lost Tess, Joel is ruminating on sort of his role as a protector now that he has no one to protect. And it just perfectly works for where that character is at and helps shepherd him to where that character has to be. It's such a writer's thing to have Bill say, "We're protectors," like in a Death Note like that in the episode. They could have just not done that, but they do it, and it really sets the future of the season in motion. So I just love it.
Definitely. And one last thing I'll say on this, I remember I was not the only one who was taking to the internet and looking to Mason and Druckmann and being like, "What the fuck, guys? It's too early for this.
We didn't ask for this. We did.
Yeah.
We wanted our heart ripped out, but not like this."
And I don't remember which one of them responded, but one of the two of them got on Twitter and was like, "Guys, this was the happy episode." And I was like, "Oh no."
It's crazy how true that is. This is the happy episode.
Oh,
the
yeah.
tears are real,
God.
but they're like pure and not coming from a place of, no, you're making decisions that are ruining your life and everybody else's.
That's the happy episode. They're sick. Everyone's sick. I will say, though, I was worried because now I've seen White Lotus. Going back to White Lotus briefly, I've only seen the first 2 seasons, but of course, Murray Bartlett, who plays Frank in The Last of Us show, has a very interesting and slightly different role in The White Lotus. I was worried that it would color my view of the character, but it turns out that that actor just has range, and he's great in everything he does, and didn't prevent me from... I actually wish that Frank had an Australian accent, because it's hot. But at the same time, I just love the performance there, and it's real good. So check out season 1 of The White Lotus for more Murray Bartlett, too. Oh, man. But yeah, moving on, we have sort of the intro to Kansas City and this deeper, darker understanding of Joel as a person who's done bad things. Because as Joel is regaining his humanity, I think part of that process for him is coming to terms with and acknowledging out loud, like to Ellie, what's happened before. And so he talks about being on both sides of the ambush, for the vehicle that gets trashed that they got from Bill. And he talks about how Ellie shouldn't have had to, shoot the guy or stab the guy that attacks them. And he's worried about her innocence being lost, but the whole time it's also about all of the things that ruined his innocence, essentially, and how he's gonna ultimately have to atone or at least acknowledge that they occurred if he's ever gonna grow as a person.
Well, and I think you have noted here, we do get cuts to Kathleen in this episode, who she
is this?
Phenomenal. Another amazing. Just like chef's kiss writing choice here.
And again, the fearlessness of just shooting, let's go halfway across the city and see what this other group of people are doing. Amazing. Would never happen in the game. But that's sort of, almost like part 1 of a 2-parter, which there's a lot of lately around here. But also the episode 5 that goes from Please Hold to My Hand, Hank Williams, to Endure and Survive, where we're introduced at the end of the previous episode to 2 wonderful characters, Sam and Henry. Yeah. Chelsea, what do you have to say about those 2?
It's another pairing of characters who are a sort of father-son, in any case, 2 people who love each other very much, and one is looking after the other and making decisions to try and protect that one. There's countless examples of that throughout this show. And for us to have Henry and Sam, who were in the games, but for them to give us the addition of Sam also being deaf, giving another reason for Sam to so heavily rely on Henry, is really genius. And I still love the fact that Henry learned ASL to better communicate with his younger brother, because statistically that does not happen very often in families where family members will learn ASL in order to communicate better. And so I love those characters. And of course, we have the tragic ending where Henry kills himself after Sam has turned, and Henry is forced to kill Sam to save Ellie. And it becomes a catalyst for Ellie to want more than ever for the idea of a cure to be real, and for this journey to ultimately mean something after this guilt over failing Sam because her blood did not prevent him from turning.
Yeah, it's this episode that looks forward as much as it looks back, again introducing us to that pairing, but also really what I love mostly is or most of all is Kathleen's speech at the end. She's talking to Henry about Sam, and we learn that Sam was a collaborator, or Henry was a collaborator for the Resistance, and essentially in order to get medicine betrayed Kathleen's brother, the leader of the Resistance up to that point, the spiritual kind of leader who is like all about forgiveness and really inspired people to revolt, ends up getting him killed. And so Kathleen has a very big axe to grind, very reasonable. But what she says at the end is, kids die in this world, Henry? Like, this is absolutely just what happens. You cannot act as though the entire world, all of our lives are expendable around this one kid and keeping them alive. You have to not behave that way. And I think that she's speaking, inadvertently, but like to the audience. I mean, it has huge undertones of what decision Joel is going to make at the end of this season and the game. But then also moving on, looking forward, even the message that Kathleen has of kids die, it just happens. Like, ultimately, may not sound so profound, but like it has reverberations. Her subsequent lines about guilt, about what it does to everybody, destroys everyone if you start acting this way, is all about the cycles and the choices, and it reaffirms the themes that we've already talked about the show. So
yeah,
which is very
Isn't
powerful.
This episode also where we first get bloaters?
Yep.
Or we first see a bloater. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's the only example of a bloater in this season.
Yeah.
And but and I understand, like, okay, budget wise, maybe there was some hesitation about bringing it out in more than one episode, but like it just made the most sense. It's terrifying. Yeah. I don't need to see them like kill 5 bloaters. I don't think that's going to add to the show. Seeing one and seeing it really behave and act and walk and move exactly how it does in the game, using its brute force to pull Perry's head off and kill all of those other people. Just, it's a force, and this is terrifying, and honestly, I'm scared of it. And so the lesser time we have around that bloater, great, because watching our heroes run from it, I would be there too, just absolutely running. And there was a child clicker, I think, in this, or a younger.
That's when it ultimately killed Kathleen.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
Thank you for mentioning that.
No, you're right.
Yeah, forgotten about that.
The sheer variety that we're introduced to, and also just the poetic justice of it being a problem that's brewing underneath Kansas City, while the humans are all dealing with an oppressive Fedra, a more oppressive than usual Fedra at KC, having this whole resistance while all the infected are underground, then having to deal with that. It's like, these are the consequences. We ignored this problem, and now it came back to bite us, or in Perry's case, dehead us. So it just is it works on so many levels. Let's talk now about the reunion episode between Joel and Tommy, which is appropriately titled Kin. It's episode 6 of season 1. What do we think?
Something that stands out in all of the other episodes is the failure that occurs when one person tries to enforce their will over somebody else because they, quote, know best or whatever. We saw that in the last episodes with Kathleen, and look where that ended up. not only is the Kansas former QZ that had just liberated themselves from Fedra, they are screwed now, right? Because their entire military force was just wiped out by the zombies in pursuit of Henry, by the infected in pursuit of Henry, and now the QZ is left unprotected, and it's because of Kathleen's ultimate pursuit of vengeance after Henry for the death of her brother. And there's other examples of that I know better than everybody else mentality throughout the rest of the show. And so in this episode, Jackson is kind of the antithesis of that, as we see a commune. I mean, they literally call it out. It is communism. They're sharing, they are relying on each other for protection and community. And so it's a best case scenario for what life post cordyceps looks like in this world. And it's a stark contrast, like I said, a stark contrast to Kansas City or any other act of love in the other episodes, say from Long Time.
I mean, even just hearing Christmas carols, you're like, in this world? Really?
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable. But the reason that they have had that success is by working together. You called it out exactly. And also what you were saying about, I know best, or trying to put your will on others. Joel does this to Tommy. He's happy to see him, but ultimately he's like, you got to take this girl. And now, I think there's a lot that we could talk about. I know Chelsea and you and I did at the time, about Joel, the reality of Joel feeling frail, feeling weak, feeling like he actually probably couldn't get Ellie safely. And that makes his choice more magnanimous than it is, more selfless to put Tommy in it. But he's endangering a father of an expectant mother, or a husband to the leader of, one of the board members of Jackson, all because he doesn't want to deal with his potential feelings for Ellie, or he's trying to put his stuff on somebody else, and fortunately realizes at the end, after Ellie's pissed at him, that that's not what he should do. And he does make a decision to no longer try and put his on Tommy, and that's good. They leave, but this was a great episode for showing what the other way to make a decision is.
Totally. I really love what's being pointed out here about the contrast, especially when you think about, episode 5 to episode 6, really seeing that contrast, Chelsea, that you were pointing out between Kansas City and the way it functioned or didn't function, and Jackson. And it was definitely a very fun moment in the show that gets called out, where Joel is like, "You're not communists, are you?" And it's like,
Tommy would have
we
some
are.
Thoughts about that. Yeah, we are.
And Tommy, well, I think Tommy was like, hell no.
Yeah, we're living.
Right.
He's living in denial.
Right. And then
It's
Maria
like,
says, "No, this is a commune. We're communists."
yeah. It's like, oh yeah, I guess we are. It's like, don't think too much about it. You'll blow a gasket. But yeah.
What about episode 7?
Yeah, well, Left Behind. Oh God, it's like, it's a testament. Look, Bella Ramsey as Ellie's acting has been consistently just amazing the entire show. And then when we finally get what was a DLC for the first video game, integrated in, this backstory, which has been hinted at up to this point in the season, to finally get the Ellie and Riley story. Riley, played by Storm Reed, really excellently, just heartbreaking, heart-wrenching in all the right moments. And it also shows Ellie's first having to go it alone. What would it look like if Joel did die? What would it look like if, how unprotected is she, and has she ever been that way before? So I think it's a great episode, and absolutely made perfect sense to have in the show, and it was so well executed.
Yeah, it's a pitch perfect adaptation. Everything that needed to be the same is. And I love the framing device of Joel has just been injured at the end of the previous episode. He's dying, bleeding out in the basement of this abandoned house. And Ellie's like, "I don't know what to do." And Joel sends her off, says, "You need to leave. I can no longer protect you. I'm gone. I'm done for. Go up to Tommy and he will help you finish this, whatever this is." And so she climbs the staircase and she hesitates before grabbing the handle and doing exactly what he just told her to do. And then we get the Left Behind flashback. And so we have that take place. Obviously, it ends with both of them, Riley and Ellie, getting infected. And so Ellie has this parallel choice between the end of the Left Behind story with Riley and then this moment with Joel in this house to do whatever she can to protect whatever remaining time she has left with Joel rather than abandon him as he initially asks. And so we see her then make the decision to open the door, rush through the house, try and find something that is going to help Joel's situation. And that's the choice that she makes here. She chooses the choice of love and trying to protect her time with Joel as much as she can.
I'm thinking of a test line from episode 2. Save who you can save.
Mm-hmm.
She thinks she might be able to save Joel. Yeah, and it really leads perfectly into episode 8 when we are in need. You know, Ellie is able to get some penicillin for Joel, which saves his life. But it doesn't come without costs. And really just the show, I think one of the things that the first game also did, but which the show excels at, is again showing what these other entire groups of people, what their dynamic is. And in these survivors led by David that we're introduced to in this episode, the When We Are in Need, a cult of cannibals, as it turns out, really is a completely different look at the exhaustion and how far humanity will go to survive. And also how to control a group of people that are desperate and how they find comfort in religion. You know, there are so many truths about us that are hidden in these characters that are really interesting. And David is every bit as creepy, if not even more so, than that character was in the game.
Yeah, and this was Troy Baker actually guest starring
as Buddy
David.
Boy.
Yeah, and I mean, phenomenal performance, but also this was just another way where the show was really able to capture how the game made me feel. And this whole sequence of Ellie navigating this lodge that's on fire with David chasing her, that felt so claustrophobic and so suffocating to play in the game. And to see how faithfully they adapted it. And also the final exchange in that episode when Joel and Ellie are reunited was just, I think, the perfect ending to the episode. There was nothing else that could be said in that moment.
This episode, I think, is the one that makes me cry the most, or at least one of the most, from in those last 5 minutes specifically, from the point she is like crouched over David's body and just like hacking away at his face with a cleaver, and like the raw emotion on her face and the sort of emotional catharsis and heart-wrenching despair as she is like tearing this man apart who was basically promising to do the same to her. And then as she escapes, having killed David, when Joel grabs her and she panics after the ordeal she's just been through, Joel comforts her with the baby girl line. And it's the first time he's called anybody baby girl since his daughter died 20 years ago. And it's such an emotional release to have Joel finally solidify this relationship that he has developed with Ellie. And as he holds her in that moment, still alive, as opposed to Sarah being dead the last time he called her baby girl, it's a promise to himself that he will do anything to protect Ellie from the same fate. And he gets to keep that promise in the next episode.
Doesn't he? For better and for worse, I guess.
See, you're going to make me cry. I definitely cried the last time I saw that episode, but yeah, you're really, Chelsea, you're really bringing it home.
You're welcome.
Like how multifaceted and how many layers there are in this series, and how complicated it really is, and how one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. I think that very much applies to this show.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And especially to the finale, watching Joel, who in some ways is more human than he has been the last 20 years. He's found love again. He's found his fatherly sort of instinct and behavior. He's again able to admit deep, dark secrets, the suicide attempt that he tells Ellie about, and this resolve that he has to protect her. At the same time, we see a switch flip, and the people that he simply mows down to get back to Ellie, the Fireflies that all had families of their own, I bet, that will not get to go home and see their kids because Joel happened to them. And it's the crux of everything that's being built to, and is just an absolutely harrowing way. This is one way to protect somebody. And I think that unfortunately we see both sides of the argument. Both Marlene and Joel don't give Ellie the choice whether or not she should be able to give her life, which is what it will cost in order to save or produce for a cure to be produced. So neither of the adults that have sworn in some cases to protect Ellie are actually giving her a say, even though a case is made for one over the other. Marlene says to Joel, you know what she would want to do. She would want to do the right thing. And Joel knows it's true, but he takes her anyway and then lies to her about it. These are the ways in which we protect. Again, what do we do for love? How far would we go for love? So Joel's got his humanity back. Great, long last. He's also less human than ever because he's done this monstrous thing in the name of something good, which is the worst monsters do that. And he's lied to himself, and he's lied to Ellie, and we're lying to the ones we love to protect them. It rings true.
I mean, it's another pretty pivotal fork in the road as a viewer, but I think also as someone playing the game, because when you're playing the game, obviously you're gonna go get Ellie because that you have to end the game, but there is a choice that you can make in the game. You can choose whether or not to shoot the doctor that is performing her surgery. And I'm just gonna admit that when I played the first time, I thought I was gonna have to shoot the doctor. I was like, I can't just walk up and take her. And Mark was watching me play, and he was like, no, you could have just taken her. He would have let you take her. You did not have to shoot him. But I think it is very, very important that they chose to have Joel shoot the doctor in this episode, because that very much plays into a major plot point of season 2.
Right. Something I appreciate about this being an adaptation is that in some ways, when you're playing as Joel, you understand him almost a little bit too much.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's obviously a character who loves Ellie very, very much and would not survive losing her. He wouldn't. There would not be a future for Joel without Ellie, period. And so as you're playing as him, there is a part of you that can be like, I'm just doing what I've done the whole rest of the game, which is mow down the enemy in front of me. But having to watch it completely separate from participating in it in this instance lets you completely separate yourself from that sympathy, as we should, because what Joel is doing is a terrible thing. And granted, Marlene has also done a terrible thing, not to the same extent. But when you take away somebody else's agency, then you create entirely new problems.
In the camera, in the show, the camera's looking down on Joel. I mean, you're literally watching him do that at his feet. The camera's like at his feet level, like watching him walk in and shoot people and kill people. And it's like, we could not look at Joel, first of all, the same, maybe not the same ever again. And also we know what he's doing. We know why he's doing it, but we're not going to glorify it, I think, is the risk that the game doesn't necessarily, again, it's an action game. It's a shoot 'em up. You have to shoot, you have to get to the next level. But the show very much, I think, has a voice and an opinion on what maybe he should have done, but still presents it as no, this is what he's doing. And having that sort of ability to play as Joel taken away from you allows you to live, I think, with the heinousness of his actions. Mm-hmm. Much as we would understand them. It's just so well done. And for a game ending that had such a monstrous act as your so-called hero's ending, it aged and was adapted remarkably well, to the point where the final moments of the final episode, Joel is like giddy, and he's like talking about how Ellie would have loved Sarah. Like you can openly talk about your daughter now that you got a surrogate daughter that you like are totally in like it okay with now. And as much as I want to feel overjoyed for his character, I can't, because it's not like he's gloating, but it feels like he shouldn't be this happy given what he just did. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, Joel hasn't had anything to live for a long time, and he has that now. And I think, as an outsider looking in, I can objectively state what he did was wrong. But if I'm being really honest with you, if I put myself in the shoes of someone like Joel, who really didn't have anything to live for, who had suffered losing everyone, including his own daughter, and had been thrust into this apocalyptic environment where every day is a fight to survive, if he found a surrogate daughter, she's everything to him. And I don't know that I could confidently sit here and say that I wouldn't be tempted to make the same choice if it were me. That's where it gets you. It gets you because you have to hold up that mirror and accept your humanity and how flawed it is.
Right. As you were saying earlier, Eric, when Joel mows down all of the fireflies in the hospital just to save Ellie, he becomes his least human. But at the same time, the reason he's doing it is so that he can protect Ellie and be the most human he's been in 20 years. And it's the duality of that decision and how, depending on your perspective, looking at it is, that's what that's it. That's everything. Is one person, one perspective, you're the hero, one perspective, you're the absolute villain and monster. And it's a beautiful, heartbreaking thing to witness.
Yeah, and just kind of final thought here is that the thing that he's found that he lost, a reason to live for, he could have just, chosen to live for being happy that he saved the world. Getting Ellie safely to the right doctors at the right moments to develop a cure that ends up saving people, but that's all intangible, and Ellie in his arms, asleep, is tangible.